to begin, what's SEO? You know, over the past couple of years, I've heard real estate agents talk about it a lot, or have a lot of questions about it. I don't think that's necessarily a really good amount to understand how to do it, but these kind of to get the sense, hey, this is important. I kind of generally vaguely know I should be doing it, but what is it and why? So SEO stands for search engine optimization. And it's the process of making sure that your site will show up first. SEO can apply for all the different search engines. There's ways that you can optimize for Yahoo and for Bing and for Google and the GoDuckDaddy or GoDuckGo or whatever. And there's all these different search engines out there. But frankly speaking, the king of search engines is Google. And as such, we're going to focus on that for the bulk of our optimizations. And because of the fact that Google is the king of the search engines right now, typically if you're going ahead and doing something that's good for Google, it's going to be good for the rest of them. So why is SEO important? Well, when it comes to people that are looking for real estate, 74% of the people turn to the internet for buying or selling a home. 75% of the people never go past the first page of Google, and 72% of leads go with the first agent they speak with. So those are some pretty big numbers to tell you one small simple fact. You really need to make sure that you're as early into the search process as possible for people. And in this era, that means being on the front page and people go and search online. And when they're talking about searching online, as I said before, it comes down to searching on Google. So what's important for good SEO? This is a huge can of worms in terms of addressing the question. There's tons and tons and tons of different factors. If you ask around, some people may say there's 200 different influencing factors that go into how Google decides, where they're going to put the page or where they're going to put your website on the search engine ranking page. You may see it later referred to as SERP. But frankly speaking, there's probably some more, but ultimately the big factors can be simplified down into these 6 simple steps. So that's user experience, reputation, structure, content, mobile friendliness, and speed. And one thing that as we go along the slides, you'll kind of get a better feel for is that these are all really closely interconnected in a lot of ways. And even though it can seem really complicated, and really if you want to dig into a lot of the nitty gritty details and a lot of the different areas of it, it can be really complicated. Once you sort of understand what it is that Google is trying to do and what it is that they're looking for, you'll understand it's really not all that difficult to get yourself to where you're already 90% there. So let's get started talking about reputation. Ultimately, what Google wants is to have a good search experience. So if you tuned into my last webinar where we talked about lead generation, effectively, I mentioned that Google understands that, hey, Yahoo was big before they came along, and if at any point another search engine offers a better search experience, then they may end up becoming the next internet giant. Google doesn't want that. And in order to do so, they care a lot about preserving the search experience. What that means for me and you is it means that when we look for something, Google wants to make sure that we're ultimately going to find it. And there's some other aspects that go into it. With that saying, site age is one of them. So you may think, well, how is that relevant? The way that Google looks at it is if a site's been around for a long time and there hasn't been any sort of red flags, if you will, then you're going to go ahead and say, okay, well, this site's probably reputable. They're probably not going to have any future behaviors that are going to effectively throw off or put the person searching in a bad place because they have a history of having good behavior. Past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. Google knows that. Google recognizes that. And so the longer you have a site around demonstrating these good SEO behaviors, Google's going to reward that. Now, there's going to be an asterisk to every single point here because when you look at these, Google will say, yeah, that's important, but it's not the biggest thing or of the ultimate importance. And you'll find that with pretty much every single thing, there's always kind of a by the way or well, don't just solely focus on that. With that said, for site age specifically, if you have a new site, don't worry. It's okay. Showing good behavior in other aspects will ultimately get Google to look at you in a favorable way, even if you have a young site. And this is something which, is true for everything along the way. Ultimately, as long as you're kind of generally heading in the right direction and you're doing things in a generally good way, Google's going to be okay with that and is going to reward you, especially considering the fact that, honestly speaking, you're even by going, let's say, in a 70% good direction, you're already better than 90% of the people out there. With site age specifically, one thing to note is that anytime you do make a big change with your website, let's say, for example, you change, where your website's hosted, or you do some significant changes to the site structure, Google will actually temporarily provide a penalty to your site. Or what that means is it will rank your site lower for a short period of time because they want to make sure that what you haven't done is say, okay, I've gotten my site #1 for this thing. Now I'm going to go ahead and sell my site to somebody else who wants to go ahead and change the content or change what's on there, change the search experience for the people looking for it, and then it goes ahead and ruins the whole search ecosystem. So this is something that can be changed pretty rapidly, and typically any changes, significant changes to your site, will take anywhere from 30 to 90 days to see sort of a leveling off effect, but it can happen sooner. Site security. So this one's a big one. Generally speaking, as long as you have your site professionally done, you're going to be in the clear. A big thing is just to make sure that whenever you're collecting people's information, that process is secure. And with that, you want to make sure also that you're getting that HTTPS as opposed to just an unsecure site structure, so that way Google knows that you care about the information and the information security that comes with the people that are visiting your site. And the last one for reputation is backlinks. And we'll talk about how to get backlinks a little bit later. But effectively, you can understand this as how many people are linking back to your page. So the way that you can understand this is, how many people link back to your page. Google looks at that as in how many people are vouching for you, or how many people recognize, okay, you're, legitimate, or someone that can be trusted. And at that point, they're going to say, all right, we can go ahead and trust them as well. User experience. So user experience, or also referred to as UX, is sort of what can generally just be seen as a kind of common sense approach to how a website should be structured, how it should be designed, and what you should be doing. Um, as I talked about, Google really cares a lot about the search experience. They don't want to have, let's say, someone who, they have a really awesome website. They ranked really high for a search term. They show up at the top of Google. Google sends them a lot of traffic their way, and then all of a sudden, they end up selling their site to some spammer, and then all of these people who go into this website end up getting their information tricked, and it becomes a terrible experience, which makes Google look bad. So give leads what they want. If the information that you provide on your site, if the links that you go ahead and have there, if the structure for that says one thing, just make sure that the content matches. It's really simple for when you're having a blog post, or when you're having content that talks about something. Let's say, for example, you're talking about something that can be found in your area. Well, make sure you talk about that same content if that's what you have in the information that you provide in the title, and in the website metadata and whatnot, which we'll go a little bit more into later. Effectively, just make sure that there's no gaps in the process between what you promise and what you deliver. Make it easy for them to get to what they want. So this is something in which you, again, if you're dealing with someone who's designing your website for you, you'll want to make sure that you're working hand in hand with them, or at the very least, making sure you pay attention to what they do. And if you're doing it on your own, you really should think about essentially not so much what you can do extra for it, but making sure you don't do too much. And what I mean by that is, I've been to real estate websites, to agent websites, to broker websites where there's a lot of pop-ups where it's really unclear as to how to find what I'm looking for, where they've tried to make it look so fancy or try to do too many details or moving pieces and gizmos, and it's just a mess, and it becomes confusing, it becomes frustrating, and frankly speaking, there's a lot of competition out there, and so you want to make that process as smooth and relaxing as possible. If at any point the person visiting your site can't find what they're looking for within a short period of time, there's a good chance that they're going to click away from that. And when they click away from that site, when they go ahead and just get on your site, then click away immediately, what that's referred to as a bounce. And Google looks at how many people bounce on your site, how many people just visit your site and don't really engage with it or don't really spend a lot of time with it. And they're going to say, all right, well, if they search for this thing and then they end up on your site and immediately leave, the site didn't have what they were looking for. Okay, we need to put that site farther down in terms of the rankings so that way we're not going to deliver the same experience for the next person searching. And similarly, this goes into removing distractions. Uh, one of a really unfortunate experience I had was in a call with an agent where we were talking about their site and talking about how to optimize their experience for not only the site but also advertisements and essentially how to deliver a better online experience. They had a really loud video playing in the background of their site, so I wasn't able to even concentrate on talking to them because the video would start and I didn't see the button for how to pause it. Um, Again, this is not a matter of things that you can or should do. It's just a matter of making sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't. Uh, don't try and do too much. Again, try and go for the simpler route when in doubt. And in general, just make sure you're not doing anything which can annoy or put off site visitors. It's going to cause them to leave or be dissuaded from continuing onto your site or digging deeper into your site. Because again, these are really significant factors when Google decides, okay, is this the kind of website that I'm going to show to people when they're looking for this content? Content and structure. So when you're talking about search engine optimization, we mentioned Google a lot. And the idea is humans first, search engine second. But them too, okay? The idea is that it should be a marriage between what's good for humans, the people who are looking for it, but also making sure it still plays along really well with what the search engines are looking for and making sure we can communicate that content in an effective way. So this may get a little more technical as this goes on. Again, I encourage everyone to ask as many questions as you like. In the event that you want a follow-up call after this or that you want to talk in more detail as to, hey, what's this? Or I'd like more information about that, or how do I know about this? Feel free to leave your information. If you like, if you're an existing Chime customer, then one of our customer success managers can reach out to you and have a call with you. If you're new to Chime and you want to find out more information, that's okay too. Feel free to leave your phone number right there in the questions field. Again, no one else can see this but us, so it's absolutely private, and we'd love to talk to you more and help answer some questions. So going on to content and structure. Optimized metadata is really important. And the importance of that is making sure that when people are looking for something, Google knows what it is, so it can go ahead and send that back. Looking at this photo, for example, this is something that we'd call alt text. So it's text when you hover over the image, it'll show that text. Now, why it's important is because even though when you or I look at this photo, we look at it and say, oh, wow, that's a gorgeous bedroom. However, for Google, if they go ahead and read the alt text for this, they're going to think this is a photo of Britney Spears. Obviously, this is not ideal. Now, while this is a funny example, what we do see a lot of is instead of alt text, which is misleading, we see a lot of blank alt text. And if Google doesn't know what it is, then it's just not going to bother trying to bring it up when people search for it. And that's really important when Google's deciding, okay, is this website delivering a lot of good quality rich content that can help answer or respond to what the searcher is looking for? over here, we can see metadata. And metadata is really important. Metadata is, again, information that you'll go ahead and put into your site's backend information, and that's what's going to show up when people search for your site. So when you see your site information come up on a Google search listing and you see the information below that, then you can go ahead and get a glimpse as to what metadata is provided. And it's important that you provide metadata that's descriptive, but also you want to try and hit some of the keywords that you're going for. Again, I go back to the humans first, search engine second rule, because you don't want to just try and put in a bunch of keywords and just say, realtor in this area, go ahead and put in as many keywords as you can to try and search to make sure that when people search for them, your name pops up. Because when people see that, it's not really going to seem inviting. It's not going to seem like something that people want to go into. And Google pays attention to those things. So it's just important to remember that we want to make sure it's descriptive, informative, and as a secondary note, that we're also hitting those keywords that are important to rank for and are important when people are looking for the content that you want to go ahead and show up for. Blogging, not just for millennials. So I found some really fun blogs from different realtors where they essentially talked about the importance of blogging and what it was for them. I'm not affiliated with any of these realtors. I just came across them when I was doing a Google search. And with that, I thought that they had some interesting quotes, as well as showed a pretty interesting variety of different topics that they talked about. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about blogging is because I think it's one of the realtors' greatest tools when it comes to delivering success in SEO. And I think it's one of the most underutilized ones. When we talk about blogging, it's basically a free invitation for you to go ahead and say, here's content. I can make it text heavy. I can focus on any keywords I want. And I get the opportunity to put my voice out there. And when you put your voice out there enough times, with enough consistency, with enough persistence, and in a good enough way, eventually people will listen. And when I say in a good enough way, on one aspect, of course, we're talking about making sure that you're putting good quality content out there. But again, going back to the making sure that our data structure is set up properly, we want to make sure that Google knows you're putting out good quality content by ensuring that you're putting all that information there so Google knows what to look for when it reads your page. So for Ellen Pitts of Harmony Realty, she talks about blogging as a way of essentially trying to establish herself as an expert in the area and making sure that she can provide information about her area. Well, guess what? When people are looking for that type of information within her local area, there's a higher likelihood that her website is going to come up because of the fact that she's doing consistent blogging. And what I thought was really neat was that you see a lot of different varieties in here. So some of them talk about family-friendly breweries, senior housing, home staging, the 5 best bakeries. Again, some of it's real estate related, some of it's just talking about the neighborhood. And as local area experts, you're going to be the go-to person. You're going to know the best food spots or the most exciting things to do on the weekend, or which areas have the best schools and which areas have the best football teams, and all of these different pieces of information where you're not going to have as much competition. You don't have to worry about necessarily competing with these big sites like Zillow and Realtor.com because you're focusing on your local area. And that's something which they may not have the interest or the time to really delve into deeply or to care a lot about, but the people that are looking to buy or sell a home in your area, they do care a lot about that. And they do care a lot about making sure that you are a local expert. You know what you're talking about when you're talking about that area. And with that, on one hand, it's going to make it easier for your site to show up. It's going to make it so you're going to get more eyes on your page. But also, when they go ahead and see that content, it's going to double as just another way to show your expertise in that area. And another note with that, one of the fun things that you can do, let's say, for example, you're talking about family-friendly breweries or the 5 best bakeries in the area, well, you can go ahead and talk to those people. you can say, hey, I'm a realtor in this area. I do a regular blog. I get lots of people checking it out. Want to let you know I featured you guys in my blog post, um, just so you know. And what oftentimes will happen with that is that everyone's happy to get any matter of, uh, you know, free press. And with that, they'll go ahead and say, hey, guess what? We were just featured as the #1 bakery in this area. Well, with that, when they go ahead and provide a link to your site, that will go ahead and help your SEO. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that as one of your strategies, making sure you're talking about these local businesses, talking about these places around the area. And effectively, what that's going to do is make sure you're not only establishing yourself as a local expert, you're not only building relationships and making your name out there known and having that free publicity on the other side by having them share your website, but you're also helping your SEO benefits so that that way, when other people who are not even connected to that process begin searching, your website is going to be even higher. So for this next one, the Jeff Nelson of Live Gulf Shores Local, you can see just another different variety of the types of uh, blogs that he posts. And again, you can see that it's completely different from the previous one, completely different style, completely different tone. Uh, Ultimately, you want to make sure that the blog matches what you know, what you want to talk about. And frankly speaking, when Jeff's talking about the reason why he blogs and how it's to, uh, give him the upper leg or to help him out in competing in such a competitive industry, he's blogging 4 to 5 times a week, or at least that's what he's going for. From that perspective, if you're going to talk 4 to 5 times a week about something, you want it probably to be something that you're really familiar with, that you're really comfortable with, and frankly speaking, also something that you're really enjoying to talk, you really enjoy talking about. It's going to show. It's going to be very transparent if you're talking about something you have no interest in. It's going to seem flat. It's going to be stale. And with that, you want to go ahead and try and find a way to, blend what it is that you do and what it is you're passionate about in terms of your career life as a realtor. But also, I recommend trying to find ways to mix in your hobbies as well. I've seen some really great success with real estate agents talking about different places they like to go for hikes and for climbing and for taking their dog out for runs and things like that, and showcasing photos that they've taken and so on and so forth, which again has all the benefits that I talked about as well previously, but adds a human side and allows the leads coming in to feel more connected, to have that connection to where they feel that, okay, now I'm getting connected with this individual as a person, not just, another realtor wearing a suit in a sea of realtors who, uh, from surface value, I can't distinguish one from the other. But when you start to attach that information, when they see that you're talking and talking and talking, there's so much information out there about you that you're very open and public, then they feel more at ease in terms of being able to connect with you. And then at that point, you're one step closer to earning their business. For Alex Beauregard of Toronto Realtor with Freeman Real Estate, talks about, again, looking at blogging as a way to establish himself amongst the competition. And again, you can see that there's a different variety in the content. Um, what I recommend is, in the event that you're trying to figure out where to get started with a blog, and in the event that you're not sure as to, what kind of content uh, you can do, uh, take a look at what other realtors are doing. More often than not, what they're talking about is something which you can take those sort of general themes and provide your own take on it. And it's perfectly okay to do so because the specifics on that information are all going to vary area by area. And that's something which, really is what's going to bring you the most success. And that's by making sure that your content is hyper local, it's super targeted, that the people reading it um, really feel like you're not just trying to be general and do kind of broad swaths of trying to get the most people as possible. They want to feel like you're talking to them. They want it to feel personal. They want to feel that connection, as I talked about, and making sure you include local details. Talk about landmarks that are local. Talk about things which you'd only know if you grew up in that area. All these different things, that's going to help so much in terms of making your blog successful. coming up with content. So I'm a huge fan of Dale Carnegie. And in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, he has this really colorful analogy of when he went when he went fishing rather, he tried to feed the fish strawberries and cream because that's his favorite food. And he didn't get great results. But when he tried, instead of looking for his favorite food, he tried giving the fish their favorite food, he got all the fish that he wanted. Um, with that said, when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about the approach for blogging, it's not in your best interest to say, all right, I've just found myself a way so I can get free leads. Awesome. This is how I'm going to go ahead and beat out all my competition. With that said, you're coming from the perspective of focusing on what you want instead of focusing on giving the people what they want. Put the focus as to what you can do to give your audience what they want, and then your audience will come and give you all of those things that you're looking for and all those things that are beneficial and helpful and exciting and that we think about as the upside when we're going and talking about why we should go ahead and focus on SEO. Relevancy to your audience and consistency in putting out content, those are key to having success with an SEO content strategy. Speed and mobile friendliness. So when it comes to speed, there's a lot of different sort of things that we can talk about with Google. So for Google, they've been using speed as a ranking factor or something that influences what a website, where a website will rank on their search engine results page or the SERP for quite some time now. However, they only just relatively recently started looking at mobile speed as well. So the relationship here, when we're talking about speed and mobile friendliness, they're very similar. And especially so when we consider the fact that when you're talking about from a PC, well, then you're going to have typically a stronger internet connection. When you're from mobile, sometimes you have to worry about, okay, maybe I don't have signal and it's going to be slower and there's going to be breaks in the connection. And so with that, there's a lot more sensitivity on the user side of it as to whether or not they want to go ahead and continue on the site, whether or not they want to continue to spend time looking at that site or trying to deal with it. Because honestly speaking, if it takes too long, they're just going to go ahead and say, it's not worth my time. Let's not worry about it. Let's go ahead and look at this at a different time. And more often than not, if they give up on something, they're not going to pick up back on it later, even if they want to. There's too many distractions, things go on too quickly, and especially when you're dealing with your cell phone, for one, you're outside, the real world's all around you. And for two, there's just all kinds of distractions, notifications, messages, calls going in at all times. And this is something which, of course, as realtors, you know about better than anyone. With that said, this is why it's more important than ever to focus on delivering a fast website experience and also one that's going to be beneficial and seamless for mobile users. So again, we're going to go pretty quickly and we're going to go fairly deeply into some of this information that we're going to go into. If you have any questions at all, if there's any further details you'd like to know about, or if you want to find out more, or if you want to talk to us, feel free to leave your phone number into the chat. We can go ahead and connect after this webinar and provide more information or help address some of the questions you may have. We'll be putting out this webinar as a video, as a follow-up video later. And in addition to that, we also have some blog posts on chime.me talking about SEO and what you can do for SEO, as well as we do have a white paper going along, coming out soon as well. So tons of information out there that we're going to be able to be sending. I do see some questions coming in. We'll go ahead and address those questions towards the end of the slides. I absolutely am paying attention and will not abandon you guys asking questions. Don't worry. So without further ado, I will keep moving forward, but just feel free to keep asking those questions. Feel free to let me know if there's anything I can provide more information on, and I look forward to sharing more. So Google's take on speed. So there's a few different ways to look at it. From the kind of one view of it, speed is not the only important thing. Uh, when it comes to what works and what doesn't work in SEO, there's a guy named John Mueller who's the senior trends and analytics analyst for Google, and he's kind of the go-to voice for it. And he says, well, if you think about what's the most important thing, if you look at speed as the only important factor, well, what's the fastest web page that you can have? A blank page, and that's never going to be at the top because it's not going to deliver a good or friendly or comfortable or value providing search experience. So with that said, speed isn't the only thing. However, that's in no way can we understate the importance of speed when we look at the data and when we look at what Google tells us themselves. You know, um, as the page time load goes from 1 to 3 seconds, the probability of a bounce or the likelihood that someone is just going to go ahead and look at your page and then close out of it without clicking on anything or without visiting another site increases by 32%. And as the load time increases, you can see that that likelihood increases a lot. And think about it in your own experience. If you went on and looked at a web page right now and you found that the site took too long to load, you'd probably just give up because it's not worth it. We live in a world where everything moves fast, and if something's taking too long and it's going too slow, then we just don't have time for it. And John Diorio of Google says the same thing. He says when half of site visits are abandoned if a mobile page takes more than 3 seconds to load. So what do we do about it? Well, our friends at Google have launched a tool called web.dev. And this is a cool tool because what it does, and by all means, if you guys want to go ahead and take a look at it, you can. I highly recommend everyone plug their site URL into web.dev. It's a free service. This is by Google. You can look it up. This is a Google tool. And essentially what it does is it says, all right, well, let's look at your site and let's see how SEO friendly it is. Let's see how SEO optimized it is. We're going to take a look and make sure that all of those different factors that come into play when we're looking at SEO and we're looking at how the structure of SEO, especially on the back end, especially on making sure that the coding and the design of it is done in a way that's going to be friendly and good for PC and mobile and all of that, especially out of like the nitty gritty technical stuff. Google's going to help you take a look at that because for the average person, they may not know if they've paid for a site and that site happens to not be the greatest on the technical side. And with that, Google is going to say, all right, well, maybe you have an awesome content strategy. Maybe you are doing everything right with SEO, but your limiting factor is the way your site's built. Now you can find out. And so with that, you can go ahead and use that tool, web.dev, to take a look at your site and see how you rank up. So moving back to the slides, another big thing that we need to pay attention to is a big update that Google has made in the future of mobile, and that is the way that they display websites on mobile, called AMP. So AMP stands for Accelerated Mobile Pages, and these are essentially, you can understand them as really streamlined websites. They're still full feature sites. They still have the same information by and large that you're used to seeing in any normal website. However, because they're mobile, they're done in a way which it takes out some of the kind of unnecessary elements or unnecessary aspects, and the coding is done in a very the coding is done in a way in which they force you to do a lot and as little as possible. And what that means for us is that when you're going and clicking on an accelerated mobile page, it's going to load a lot faster. Now, with that said, again, speed is not the only indicator. However, because of the fact that speed has a huge impact in terms of whether or not you spend a lot of time on a site or how many things you click on or what you're going to go on, well, that's going to have a lot of effect on the user experience side. So while again, speed by itself isn't the only thing, the fact that because speed isn't getting in the way of it, you're then able to click on more pages, spend more meaningful time on the site, browse through, click on a lot more things. Google's going to look at those factors and that's going to say, okay, wow, they're delivering a much better experience. And also with AMP specifically, the AMP, the structure or the coding that goes into AMP, this whole thing was designed by Google. This whole thing was Google's idea, and with that, because it's Google's idea, they give themselves special treatment. If they know that you're following along with, what their idea is, and you're designing their page specifically to work well with Google, that's also a way that can give your site a boost in terms of the rankings when people are searching via mobile. And in a recent study that the Search Engine Journal.com published, which, by the way, they're one of the go-to sites when it comes to looking into how to improve what you're doing with SEO. It's very detail oriented. It can get a little bit much if you're not interested in that sort of thing, but you can also look for some things if you have questions, and they do tend to write things in a pretty simple way. When they talk about accelerated mobile pages and the success that it can bring, their study has shown that there was a 27% increase in organic traffic within a 30-day period, a 33.8% increase in SERP impressions. So what that refers to is there's 33% more people that would see that link right there, that they would see your page show up when they searched. And the SERP, again, is this page where it's the search engine ranking page, and a 15% higher click-through rate. So that means out of all the people who saw that, 15% more clicked on it. Those are some pretty huge numbers. And that can mean a lot, again, when it comes to, bringing in that organic traffic, increasing your SEO ranking, and at the end of the day, the whole reason you're doing all this for, making sure you're getting leads in a way that's not going to cost you a premium. One thing that I am very happy to say is, Chime is leading the charge on this. We're already implementing accelerated mobile pages into our site design. It's something that we're actively testing, and we have live for a lot of our sites, and it's something which, it's exciting for me as someone who's really nerdy and really into this, the specifics on kind of going in deep into the marketing and whatnot, because we're just really committed to delivering an experience and delivering the cutting edge of technology for the people that work with us. And with that, I'm just excited to see as this, fully launches out, and once the testing is complete, and once this is something which, we've launched out to the entire customer base, all the success that it brings everyone. So without further ado, going into the question and answer portion. Okay, so is website related to domain name? For example, I've moved to a new real estate brokerage with a new website, but the domain is the same. Is that basically starting over? So that's a great question. So one of the things I talked about earlier when we talked about the age of a website, effectively what that means is the longer you have a website, and as long as you have that domain name, the more that Google is going to trust you. When you do a change like that, they're going to go ahead and say, hey, what's going on? The same way that, you can think about it is, let's say you changed a physical location somewhere. Let's say you ran a pizzeria and you moved to a different place, and you did so with new signs, and you kept the same name, but you completely did a remodeling of it. And when people go there, you'd still get people coming to eat, but they'd say, well, is this really the same place? Or did something happen with the owners? Or Google does the same thing. So the good news is you're not starting over. This isn't something where you're starting over from scratch. You may see a dip in terms of organic traffic for anywhere from 30 to 90 days. And this is something which is not based off of whoever's doing your website. This is just based off of Google. They take some time, And effectively, what it's doing is just saying, okay, is this the same content? Are these the same people? Are they delivering the same thing? Because they want to make sure that what you didn't do is say, all right, well, now I've developed all this, what some people talk about is like SEO juice. Now I've got all this, this fully charged up site. It's got all this SEO energy here, SEO juice in here. Now I've got people visiting. Okay, great. Now I'm going to go ahead and sell my site to a spammer, make lots of money, and go on vacation. They want to make sure that's not going to happen. So they're going to kind of look at you with a little bit of suspicion for some time, but just given proper behavior, making sure you're following the best practices, given a little bit of time, it'll go ahead and your ranking will go right back up to where it was. Again, the assumption there being though, it has to make sure that from the back end, the technical side, everything else is as good as you were doing before. You could lose your ranking if on the technical side of it, if the structure of it isn't as optimized or it's not as fully fleshed out. Well, then you may not get to where you were before. But all things being equal, just a change in terms of hosting and moving to a different website, that in itself isn't a killing blow for your site. Okay, yes. So if you're saying, oh hey, my site's not secure, that's something which is a pretty simple fix, and you just go ahead and talk to your customer success manager just to go ahead and make sure you go ahead and get started on that process to go ahead and do so. What is the biggest impact on SEO? Oh boy, that's it's a big question, and it's hard to come up with a really solid or kind of all-in-one answer to that. Um, what I would say is to one, look at it in terms of what is it that the lead is looking for? What is it that they want to see? Make sure you're delivering that. And as long as you can answer that question, and as long as you continue to answer that question, then that will go ahead and effectively put you in a good place for SEO. With the asterisk or caveat to that being, just make sure that overall, in terms of your site structure, you're set up and you're optimized. How do I know what people are searching on Google, and how can I make sure my website is top? So there's a few things. So with that said, the site age, as I kind of talked about earlier, isn't the only thing, but it's still a thing. There is the potential that all things being equal, that you're going to have a very difficult time beating somebody who is higher than you. And it's really simple to go ahead and just search for yourself within the area that you're searching for, and trying different search terms and seeing what comes up. And if you're not finding what you're looking for, or not finding yourself rather, try and figure out, okay, well, how can I put more content on my page, which will go ahead and answer that question. And in terms of how to get that higher if you're not already there, um, again, there's a few ways to look at it. So from a marketing perspective, you always take a look at your competition, see what they're doing, and see either what you can be doing better or what you can be doing more of. In the event that, again, they're also doing blogging, their site's also structured well, then at that point, it's time to pay attention to, okay, how are things changing? Because anytime, and by the way, this is something which Google does regularly, several times per year. Google will do these big algorithm changes where they say, okay, um, right now the whatever that we're using in terms of our magic calculation for how we rank sites, there's something that's broken in the system. Now we're going to change it. And with that, that's something in which you have to look at it and say, all right, well, in response to that change that they did, what can I do to go ahead and take advantage of the shift in sort of the algorithm, take advantage of the shift in the landscape? Um, that sounds really technical. Sometimes it can be, which is why I'd say just ultimately make sure you're in the hands of a competent web developer. That's the kind of thing where, for example, when Google says, all right, we're going to go ahead and put a lot of emphasis and really care a lot about if we're making sure that we're delivering a good mobile search experience. Um, with Chime, we took that and we said, all right, we're going to go ahead and put a lot of focus into AMP, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we're going to go ahead and go on the process to making all of our mobile sites AMP compliant. In the event that you're dealing with a solo web dev who's not paying attention to those things, or maybe you're dealing with a company that's not paying attention to those things, then you're going to have an uphill battle. Then you're really going to go ahead and have to make up for it by working twice as hard on the content side and twice as hard in reaching out to other businesses, trying to make sure they link back to you, and all those different things which Google does care about. Um, Really, when I look at the back end of things, I just try to make sure that it's not something that's hindering you. Because if it is, then again, anything else you do is going to be twice as hard. Uh, okay, so I ran web.dev. My scores were pretty bad. Lots of technical stuff like defer non-critical CSS came up. What does that mean? How do I fix it? So um, great question. And again, this I try not to make the conversation itself too technical. It can get kind of technical, especially when we're talking about the structure side of things. When they talk about like non-critical CSS, um, CSS stands for cascading style sheets, or basically the coding that builds up your website. So before we used to talk about HTML, you can think of it as like a deeper level of that is CSS. And so effectively what they're trying to say is that um, when you're when they're trying to display this page, when they're trying to show the website, there's some stuff in there which doesn't need to be in there. So think about it as if you were trying to get a recipe for macaroni. Well, if you said, okay, step one, take out the noodles. Step two, boil the water. Step three, well, a really interesting about macaroni is it actually started in Italy in the year and then started going off on that. Um, on some level, yeah, it's kind of relevant. But if you're sitting there and you've got macaroni in your hand and you're really just starving and want to have some quick macaroni, you don't care about the history. You don't care about those kind of extra details. You just really want to find the quickest thing possible in terms of delivering you from point A to point B, which is how to go ahead and cook that macaroni. Similarly, Google looks at it as it and says, all right, well, maybe if you want to have lots of videos on your website, yeah, that's going to be something that can be kind of cool. If you want to have all these different things going on, yeah, that can be kind of cool. But ultimately, we care about making sure that when people are looking for this, they're going to go from point A to point B very quickly. And so, with that, if you have too much of the other stuff going on, they're essentially kind of saying, hey, cut it out, simplify the process, make it a little bit easier so that way people aren't going to get frustrated and say, all right, well, obviously you feel like telling me more about the history of macaroni than showing me that the recipe for it. I'm going to go elsewhere. And if they think that you're going to go elsewhere, if they think that the person visiting your site is going to go elsewhere, then they're going to go ahead and you know basically give your site a penalty by having you go lower in the rankings. How much time should I expect to put in to upkeep my site? Sounds like a lot of work. Uh, it can and it can't be. I mean, again, I can't imagine someone or a very large amount of people are able to, build their own website, or, especially an IDX site, as well as being a full-time real estate agent or running a real estate team. If you can, that's awesome. You're definitely, in the minority in that regard. Uh, I would ultimately just try and make sure you're finding people who are um, a good fit for you in terms of developing a website. It's why we wanted to make sure that we provided a completely full, seamless, IDX offering with Chime, uh, where you do spend time. What I would recommend is a better use of your time is again going into blogging or going into putting out content or finding ways to put more information on your site that's going to make it's just going to enrich your profile or enrich the way that people think about you. And with that, there's no right or wrong answer. It depends on your goals, depends on your free time, and again, kind of goes back to what I talked about. You can't just look at it and say, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and I want to be a content factory. I want to make blogs all day because that's going to get me free leads, and it's going to be a point of diminishing returns. You're going to spend so much time just trying to push out content, the quality is going to suffer. And if the quality is not there, if you're just trying to put out, one short blog every single week, stuff it full of keywords, and have it not really provide any value, um, it's not really going to be that useful. I think that you'd have a lot more luck or a lot more traction out of maybe spending more meaningful time, emotionally invested time. I know that sounds silly, but where you really care about what you're doing, you really care about what you're writing, you care about what you're sharing, and then with that, that's such where people will then care too. People can feel quality, and I think that as real estate agents, you can see that for sure when it comes to when you're showing houses. You can feel that when it comes to the quality that you give and in terms of in the social interactions, the interpersonal interactions, and it comes through in the content as well when people feel as if, hey, this is some copy paste stuff that they're just trying to push out there to have something out there as opposed to engage with me. And if they feel that that's the case, they're not going to share it. They're not going to spend a lot of time reading it. They're not going to click around and see what else you've written. They're just going to go ahead and say, okay, well, that's a minute and 30 seconds of my life, which I'll never get back. And that's really never the impression that you want to get. I've heard backlinks are really important. How do I get those, and uh, what's the best way to go about that? So backlinks, again, for anyone who's just kind of joining in with us, essentially what that means is the amount of people who are linking to your site. And um, again, I think that blogging is probably the best way to go about this. You can do, you can share on, let's say, for example, social media. If you have some really interesting, listings or properties you want to talk about, things like that, maybe open houses. Those are all ways that you can, share links out to people, and maybe other people will link back to it. Uh, but blogging is probably the best and safest way to go. And really just talking about what's in your area. Talk about relative, things that are relevant to your audience. Um, I'm a big fan of talking about, what's going on this weekend and linking to, other local businesses, local establishments, and so on. And when you do these things, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. When sites feel like that other people are talking about them, they're more inclined to say, "Oh, hey, we just got a really favorable review from, this local real estate agent who is known for their food blog or is known for their, monthly coverage on what to do on the weekends, or when they talk about, the best places to go see, to go out and explore with your kids." Those are all things which are really useful in terms of having people say, all right, well, these are people that this is a blog, or this is a site that other people are going to, and they're going to get an audience. I want to see, and I can see that they're talking about us in a favorable way. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a link back to them so other people from our audience can see that we're being talked about favorably. So that's all the time I have to answer your questions right now. Again, thank you everyone for joining me. Please make sure to let me know if you have any additional questions. I'll leave the webinar open just for a little bit if you want to leave your contact information for any additional information. If you do have questions, if you want to find out more about accelerated mobile pages, and if you're interested in maybe finding out about getting started with Chime, anything to like, let us know. You can leave your phone number or your email address. No one else can see that but me. We'll have someone reach out to you after this webinar. Thanks again so much. I do apologize if my voice is kind of not there. At times I'm a bit under the weather. So just thank you everyone for being so patient, listening in, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to speak with you.